Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Hugo Castro, Chair of the Miami-Dade Beacon Council, and thank you for joining us today for 2020 Vision, Reimagining Recovery for Miami-Dade. 5 months into a crisis that has impacted every community around the world and each of us individually, 2020 will be an unforgettable year. Unfortunately, not for the reasons we had hoped for. For 2020, it's the Beacon Council's 35th anniversary, a year we were looking forward to celebrating our strength, our prosperity, and our local economy, our community's innovation, and the many business advantages that we enjoy. We had hoped to continue building on decades of dedicated efforts that have brought over $6.7 billion in new capital investment to Miami-Dade. Although we continue to do that core economic development activity day in, day out, the thousands of businesses that already call Miami-Dade home have taken a priority during this pandemic. Our team has worked closely with the county and dozens of other partner organizations to mobilize resources, mitigate impacts, especially on small businesses, and define a roadmap for our business community's successful recovery. While Mike will speak shortly to some of those efforts, our goal today is to provide a forum for the business community to speak to what they think recovery will look like and what resources and support are needed to make it successful. We have a wonderful and distinguished panel of speakers this afternoon, and we're very grateful that they've taken time out of their busy schedules to join us today. I want to start by recognizing our corporate sponsor, Baptist Health South Florida, who has done an incredible job of mobilizing resources throughout this pandemic. We thank you for your efforts. We want to thank all the doctors, researchers, and frontline workers that have been working nonstop to care for our community. We also want to thank our media sponsor, the Miami Herald. Local news is always important, but it has been vital to our community during these past 5 months. Thank you for the great work, your commitment to Miami-Dade, and your consistent support of the Beacon Council. For today's event, that support starts right at the top, as we're lucky to have Mindy Marquez, editor and publisher of the Miami Herald, as our moderator for our panel discussion. Today's panel also includes the following: George Bermudez, Senior Vice President, Bank of America, and current board member of the Beacon Council; Boulenger, EVP, COO of Baptist Health South Florida; José C., which is CEO of Restaurant Brands International, which includes Burger King, Popeyes, and Tim Hortons; Jaret Davis, co-managing shareholder of Greenberg Traurig and past chair of the Beacon Council; Felecia Hatcher, executive director of CodeFever and BlackTech Week; and Dr. Lenore Rodicio, executive vice president and provost of Miami-Dade College. Before we hand it off to Mindy, I'd like to invite Michael Finney, the president and CEO of the Miami-Dade Beacon Council, to help set the stage by sharing some of the highlights regarding our local economy and some of the recovery efforts already on the way. Mike?
Thanks, Hugo, and thanks to our sponsors and all the panelists. You know, it's been 152 days since the first confirmed case of COVID-19 in Miami-Dade County. In this period, time appears to have been more elastic than usual. While the days have been extremely individual, while the days seem to have been eternal to us individually, businesses have had to adapt or pivot at warp speed. Microsoft declared that they've seen 2 years worth of digital transformation in 2 months. McKinsey reported that e-commerce penetration in the US has experienced 10 years worth of growth in only 3 months. Organizations in our own community, both public and private, have mobilized with the same sense of urgency. Processes and procedures reinvented, silos have been broken down as many workers work remotely for the first time. Almost 6 months in, we are trying to glean lessons from what's worked and what hasn't, reimagining what recovery will look like for our community while we are still fighting to bring the numbers down and find a vaccine. And we know we aren't alone. It is expected that the global economy to take several years to recover. Communities around the world continue to work on both the health crisis and the major economic crisis simultaneously. During the second quarter of 2020, the US GDP declined by nearly 33%. Although the second quarter GDP for Florida has yet to be released, we expect it will be in that same range. The seasonally adjusted unemployment rate for Florida stands at 10.4%, slightly lower in June compared to the US at 11.1%, and slightly lower than Miami-Dade County at 11.2%. But the increase from one of the lowest unemployment rates in our county's history of 1.5% in January of 2020 to double digits in a span of 2 months was unprecedented. Miami-Dade County's economy was just as hard hit as the nation. Several sectors saw major declines, especially leisure and hospitality, retail, and personal services. Yelp's local economy impact report, updated in late June 2020, showed about 3,000 businesses in South Florida temporarily or permanently closed. Other sectors, such as trade and logistics, continued to see positive activity despite the crisis. Overall trade saw declines throughout the first few months of 2020 during the COVID crisis, but there have been some bright spots, including trade from Europe. Port Miami saw increases in pharma and medical equipment imports. From March to June of 2020, pharma and medical equipment imports from Europe increased by 1,040% compared to the same period in 2019. For Asia, it was 175%. For Latin America, it was 39%. Throughout this crisis, the Beacon Council has continued to work with companies interested in expanding or relocating to Miami. Since October of 2019, we've secured commitments from 28 established companies that plan to bring 2,600 plus high-value new jobs and about $760 million of new capital investment to Miami-Dade County. We recently received several business attraction referrals, including a Mexican company that's involved with distribution, a Turkish software company, a Spanish furniture company, a German tech company, and 2 domestic boat manufacturers. While we remain committed to our core economic development work, the bulk of our activity as an organization since mid-March has centered around responding to COVID-19 and support for local businesses in our community. We launched BizHelp.Miami in early April to serve as a repository of information and resources to help streamline access to financial assistance programs, starting with the Payroll Protection Program. We also partnered with Miami-Dade County in the launch of the Rise Miami Fund and with CareerSource in the launch of the Layoff Aversion Fund. Our team has also worked tirelessly to help businesses understand and access these much needed funding programs. Beacon Council has worked hand in hand with dozens of partner organizations to establish a network of resources that are now providing hands-on technical assistance to our community's most vulnerable small businesses who will not make it past this crisis without significant support. We've participated in numerous task force meetings, most notably Miami-Dade County's Economic Recovery Task Force, and we're working diligently to create a roadmap for recovery for our small and disadvantaged businesses. The dialogue like today's, led by business leaders like all of those represented here today, really are essential to our ability to recover and to recover very quickly. As the impact of systemic racism has come to a head in our communities and across the US, we challenge ourselves and each other to be agents for positive change. As an organization and as individuals invested in creating a more socially responsible, equitable Miami-Dade. Part of that change will stem from partnering with organizations that share these values and commitment to uplifting the Black community and providing additional outreach to Black-owned businesses that have historically struggled with access to capital and business support services that are much needed in order to grow. As we move through this crisis, we know the economy will eventually recover, but what will it look like globally, nationally, and most importantly, for us locally, remains to be seen. This challenge represents an opportunity for us to be even more deliberate and strategic about where we focus our energies and resources. What sectors will continue to grow? What new business activities could materialize? Where will Miami-Dade lead and where will Miami-Dade compete? What skills are needed now and next? Business leaders, academia, and multiple organizations agree that reskilling and upskilling opportunities for certain segments of our workforce is essential, that a focus on technology is a crucial part of our recovery and growth. How do we ensure an inclusive, equitable recovery, and that Miami-Dade's new reality is not only diverse, but inclusive and equitable by design? Beyond recovery, how do we protect ourselves and create a more resilient business climate? These and many other questions are obviously to be answered by the business leaders that we have in front of us today. So to hear directly from some of these business leaders, I'd like to hand it off to our moderator, Mindy Marquez, editor and publisher of the Miami Herald.
Thank you so much, Michael, Hugo, and really a big thanks to our panelists who have taken time for their extremely busy schedules to be with us today. I think we'd all agree that the word unprecedented is probably often overused and misused, but we would also agree that right now that word is absolutely accurate. We are living in unprecedented times. We're battling a pandemic, and we're witnessing an incredible social justice movement that born out of the George Floyd murder that has become global. Locally, as we think about these two challenges, we face a two-tier. I think we face a two-tier challenge. One is immediate triage, and I think that's the mode that many of us have been in. The other involves longer range thinking about these issues. And this is where we really hope to focus the conversation today. It's how do our short-term approaches play into our long-term solutions, and it's where we hope we'll be able to dive in with our panelists. What is it that we need from local government, private and public sector partners in order for our community to recover? And how do we address the systemic inequities that are being surfaced by the Black Lives Matter movement? So we're just going to go ahead and dive right in because we don't have a lot of time and we have a lot of brilliant people on this panel. I'm going to start with Jaret and José. And, you know, looking ahead to recovery, what role does the business sector need to play in that recovery? And vice versa, what does the business community need from local governments and organizations to get there?
Yeah, I guess I'll kick off. Thanks, Mindy, and appreciate you having me. Yeah, it's a little complicated. I mean, I've been analogizing it to basically living in a permanent hurricane but with no physical infrastructure damage. So it makes for an interesting dynamic. So I'd sort of conflate the two. You asked about government as well as business. I combine them with my answer because, you know, as with hurricane recovery, it's the interplay that seems to be key, both on a short, intermediate, and long-term basis. The good news is for large companies like my own, from what we're seeing anecdotally, I think we have it pretty well under lock. Now, hospitality is going to be an exception to that, so we'll talk about that in a second. But from a standpoint of the large companies, you know, they seem to have mastered the necessary protocols to survive in the new normal. Most of us, I think, have been operating sort of under the assumption that this is going to be the new normal till 2024 or so. Not that that's going to be the case, but from a point of healthy planning, that's what we've been doing. We've got remote work under lock. And so we've got that going. The issue really, which is what this panel is supposed to be focusing on, is small and medium-sized businesses. So once again, put hospitality aside for a second because it's very complicated. You know, I think we, and when I say we, you know, large businesses, the Chamber of Commerce's Beacon, of course, you know, one of Beacon's main roles, why it's so critical to our community is it's the ultimate convener. It's helpful to bring them up to speed and compliance with the CDC best practices. You know, so much of consumer behavior, and we're thinking long-term now, so much of consumer behavior is driven by confidence. And right now, folks, at least the ones I'm talking to, are still worried, even to extents where they don't have to be. And for a number of large businesses, they don't have large concentrations of people. So if we can get that compliance, we can make this work. And compliance comes in two forms. One is knowledge of those practices, and then you have the more complicated aspect to it, which is the capital necessary to implement. Plexiglass purchases, sanitizer, adjustments to current space, which is really the long-term play there. Depending on how your footprint and your organization works, that's where you're going to see the most significant amount of capital investment. For our firm, if you come up, no offense, but I'm not inviting anyone to come, but if you did, you would see our conference rooms are completely different now. We've installed plexiglass dividers everywhere so that essentially coming in, if you were to come in, you would basically be completely safe because you're enclosed in a plexiglass environment, but you could still have a face-to-face meeting, still have that intimacy. And, there's still a lot of small and medium-sized businesses that could use remote work. And that's not allocating blame. That's to the contrary. It's highlighting the issue. And once again, you get into that issue of knowledge and capital. There's a lot of businesses that never implemented remote work capabilities. And some of them, I dare say, they could probably get it up and running in a week or two. But they have to, A, have the cash to implement, and B, have the know-how. And the know-how can come from consultancy, but then you get back into the cash. And this is one place, I was going to conflate the two. This is one place where government can perhaps help. Not simply to dole out cash per se, but to line up resources to see how quickly and inexpensively we can get businesses on that remote infrastructure so that they can have that long-term play, to the extent their business models allow for it, of course. My world is a great example for that. And I mention my world not simply because law is important, but because we're a service provider. And as you know, Miami-Dade County, while we have much more of a manufacturing base than the world realizes, it's still smaller than most communities. And because of that, the service businesses make up a probably disproportionately large part of our economy. So many of those businesses, whether they be accounting firms, marketing, banking, et cetera, can be done remotely, but small and medium-sized firms, many of them have not got up and running, and some of them have gone under as a consequence. And particularly if we're assuming it's simply a function of having the right software, which many times it is, many times they may have the hardware infrastructure in place, they just don't have the package there. That wouldn't be that difficult to implement, at least not that I'm aware of. You have certain remote work in a box solutions by certain companies that gets into cost, but it would be really interesting to see organizations like the Chamber, like Beacon, work towards that. Beacon has done everything from internships to a box, et cetera, sort of this one-stop shop. It'd be interesting to do the research and see how much we could have that infrastructure in a ready package so that small and medium-sized businesses who haven't implemented remote work and are still functional and want to go from just sustaining themselves or below sustaining themselves to actually thriving on a long-term basis. To me, that's a role that the chambers, Beacon, government, et cetera, can play. With respect to hospitality, it's a little more complicated. That's where creativity may get into play.
And here's Jose smiling because I see that's his right in his wheelhouse.
Oh, you know what? I'm going to hand it to Jose. Here, take the baton.
Thanks, Jared. Thanks,
It's
Mindy.
the hardest one, so thank you. I'm grateful.
Thanks for that. Thanks for the setup. I appreciate it. Look, it's great to be here, and thanks for the opportunity to share some thoughts with this esteemed panel and all the folks that are participating. We have a unique perspective in that as a restaurant, as an owner of three amazing brands, Burger King, Popeyes, and Tim Hortons, we have the visibility into the direct impact that this has had on the hospitality industry, which has been tremendously difficult and challenging. And we also have a big office on Blue Lagoon in the heart of Miami-Dade County that employs about 500 people that support our brands around the U.S. and Latin America. And so we're also seeing it as a corporate player in the community. I think from the hospitality standpoint, we've been in North America, in the U.S. and in Canada, we've been open for business throughout the pandemic. Our business, because of the capabilities to deliver food through off-premise capabilities, including drive-through, delivery, mobile order and pickup, and these advances that have been made in the business over the last few years. We've had the fortune to be open in a very difficult time and be able to adjust and adapt to the circumstances. I think this was something that was coming for quite some time. So the restaurant industry, not just quick service or fast food, but really everybody in this space has been impacted by digital over the last few years. And I think this crisis, this pandemic, and the government's reaction to it only accelerated the trend that was taking place around technology. And so from our vantage point, it's critical that businesses invest in off-premise. It's critical that they invest in technology. It's critical that they follow the consumer and the consumer trend. It's not a new thing. That's been the case for a long time. And this pandemic has just exacerbated and accelerated that situation. From a government support standpoint, I think there's really a few things that I've been advocating on behalf of our company, our brands, and the industry. One is immediate support, both for the consumer, because it has a huge direct impact on all these small businesses, whether it's franchise businesses or independents, making sure that there is liquidity or funds in the system to be able to consume, which is really important for these small businesses. Second, supporting the small businesses directly with with money to be able to help them meet payroll, pay rent, whatever the case may be, which is what's really holding folks back today. And we've seen some support at the federal level. Mayor Jimenez has taken some strides in Miami-Dade County, which I think are really important. And the other thing that we've asked for consistently and is really important is bipartisanship and clarity and simplicity in terms of what steps small businesses should be taking to weather the storm and come out of it, stronger and better than ever before. Because at times, Jaret mentioned the CDC guidelines. They're being developed on the fly, and then state associations and local associations are trying to interpret those, and there's a lot of different perceptions and interpretations of these different guidelines that are coming through. And so each municipality, in many cases, in Miami-Dade County, we see different cities have different viewpoints, so it becomes challenging. So consistency, bipartisanship, and just trying to come up with common sense solutions to the circumstances that we're facing, I think is really helpful for small businesses and hospitality to weather this storm. Thank you.
I'm going to move now to Bo and George, and it's another two-tiered question, but you can just take one or the other. What is the one thing you saw our community do as part of a response for COVID that you think is essential to recovery? And is there something that sparked a long-term solution that we need to build on?
Thank you, Mindy. And Bo, if you don't mind, I'll go ahead and go first and go ahead and pass the baton afterwards. And I think what you're hearing now is a common thing. Thank you, Bo. I think what you're hearing now is a common thing. We have to shift, we have to pivot, we need to work from home. Digital is extremely important. In fact, I think it's the key to having business continuity. Here at Bank of America, we've seen our digital banking increase almost 70%. Obviously, our financial centers were closed, where we have minimum capacity with our personnel and so forth. But I think the second shift that I've seen in Miami and this market being resilient is cash. And of course, with the Paycheck Protection Program, keeping employees on payroll was just key. And we played a huge part on that, a huge part. In fact, we were the #1 lender, providing over 330,000 PPP funds and providing over $25 billion in those funds. And we did a very heavy lifting. And don't get me wrong, working with the Treasury, working with the SBA was extremely challenging. Rules and the rules of engagements changed on real time. So we had to pivot and adjust and making sure that we were able to get those funds to our clients and clients per se in the Miami market. But doing the heavy lifting is to making sure they have the right documentation, making sure they have the right calculation, making sure they were able to pay their employees and keep their employees, pay the rent, and pay some utilities. And now we're going to go through what's called the PPP forgiveness process, which is going to be a lot easier because we already did the heavy lifting at the beginning. Now, we have all the programs that Main Street Lending Program that just kicked off, and we're partnering with it. But at the same time, as to Jaret and José, you still have some companies that have not pivoted or adjusted to working from home. And they don't have the digital capacity to do so. So we're still trying to help our clients, and we continue to help our clients in doing so. Here at Bank of America, 175,000 of our associates out of 200,000 are working from home. Locally, over 1,800 of our associates are working from home. And we are open for business. It's business as usual, taking care of our associates, taking care of our clients, and of course, taking care of our community. And we will continue to take care of our community. And so what are we doing now? So we definitely feel the deep sense of pain and loss from what we're seeing and experiencing here in Miami, and of course, across the country in many communities. The global pandemic is intensifying the underlying economic and social disparity that we're seeing. The urgency is clear for all of us. And we, as Bank of America, announced a $1 billion commitment to help drive economic opportunity healthcare initiatives, and racial equality. For many years, we have worked with many businesses and civic leaders here in Miami. And we will continue to serve and help drive those economic opportunities and upward mobility. Our work has been education, workforce development, affordable housing, access to healthcare, community engagement, and economic development. And now is the time to substantially increase those efforts. And we look forward to partnering in order to move forward. So we will continue to work as we are with Miami-Dade Beacon Council and other partnerships with civic leaders to do so. Not only helping our communities, but helping those small businesses go through this pandemic, which is, you know, it's, I don't want to say the new normal of working from home and so forth, but it's definitely, as you said, Mindy, unprecedented that we all need to work for.
Yeah. Bo, you want to jump in?
Sure, I'd love to. Mindy, Michael, Hugo, thank you so much for asking us to participate in it, my fellow panel members. This is exactly the kind of thing we ought to be doing. Isn't it nice that we're doing this too? Instead of talking about a hurricane, I was reminded the other day about, oh, it's middle of August and we're not yet working on another hurricane. So boy, is it nice to be talking about regular business and not the other things that we have to deal with. Some of the things that we have seen that we feel like the community has done really, really well with is collaboration and communication with each other. Within the healthcare industry, they're all the regional healthcare leaders and the mayor and the secretary of ACA. We talk every other day. We're on a call every afternoon. And that has enabled us to coordinate our efforts better. We've moved ventilators around. We've moved remdesivir around. It made sure that the county and the state were in alignment with us and supporting us so that we had the things that we need. Sometimes in a disaster situation, you know, our experience has been we get forgotten, or there's a lack of coordination and communication. For healthcare related to COVID, there's actually been really very great support from the state and from the county and coordination that I think has led to a much lower mortality rate in Miami-Dade County than what we've seen in some other areas. And we're really, really proud of that. The other thing that we have seen, and you know, Miami is innovative, we're open to new ideas, we're creative, and we've seen businesses that really embrace telemedicine or telework. So, you know, the Zoom tool, we didn't even know about it before. Now it's the greatest. I spend all of my days on Zoom meetings. It is a cheap, easy tool that can be used by small businesses. In terms of healthcare, the telemedicine has completely exploded. We have a telemedicine app at Baptist Health called Care on Demand. We would normally see about 800 people a month on this app. And right now we see 8,000 people a month. So, you know, really dramatic. And it has opened our eyes to, hey, maybe this could be a really useful tool for servicing community hospitals down in the Keys or Homestead or whatever, and allowing people to do wide variety of things as a screening tool, and also for mental health counseling. Like we offer it to all of our employees for free mental health counseling. So I would certainly encourage the business community to fully embrace the cost effectiveness of telemedicine and the easy access to all of your associates. And then I think too, as leaders, and I think us in Miami, we're South Florida, we're a pretty optimistic bunch, and I think it's important for us to remain that way. We're gonna get through this. The pandemic, sooner or later, will be brought to its knees by a vaccine. We don't know when, probably sometime, you know, late next year before it's widely available, but you know, this too will come to an end. But you have to embrace change. Changes happen to us, and this is very much of a marathon, not a sprint. So it's really important, I think, for all of us to take care of ourselves and to take care of the people that work for you, and to be extra cognizant of all of the issues and emotion that everybody has with kids going back to school, or the fear and the anxiety associated with it. And absolutely critical is to use the science as our North Star. The CDC guidelines are what everybody ought to be following all the time. It's something that we can hopefully all agree upon, and let's try to depoliticize what's going on with the application of science, and all really be leaders in mask wearing and social distancing. That is what turned the corner. I don't know if you all know it, but we had a surge in April. We thought it was bad, filled up all the intensive care units in South Florida, and then it died down. And around July 4th, everybody went out and partied and got together, and boy, it came back with a vengeance. Our ICUs are still full in all the hospitals in Miami-Dade County, but we've turned the corner, and admissions are on the way back down. So that's because, you know, people started to comply with the mask and the social distancing, and we've just all got to really, really insist upon that. So
thank you for that, and thank you for all the efforts. For, you know, everyone at all the employees at Baptist. Coming from I'm married to a healthcare professional, so I know the perils really well. So I'm very grateful. Felecia, we've heard you know, technology mentioned a bunch of times, and I think this has definitely catapulted us forward quicker than ever anticipated, right, into a more digital world. And I want to have a twofold question for you. I think that clearly, I'd love to talk for you to talk about like what's the silver lining, but there's also another reality, and it goes with the social justice issue, which is that there is an issue of inequality in terms of access to technology, and it's more clearly exemplified at a time like this, right? Like who has access to technology, and then for the ability to work from home, as opposed to perhaps the, you know, hospitality workers or others who don't have that. So it's two big questions, but I'm hoping you could help us out there.
Sure. Thank you guys for the invitation. You know, I think the silver lining that I hope stays into the future is has been kind of this mass adoption of technology use, right? Of solving problems. You heard from Bo talking about telemedicine on the rise. Like that needs to stay, right? It provides access to doctors that people may not necessarily have access to. I think from a cultural standpoint, if you're wanting to even have a physician or a general practice physician that looks like you, same culture, same gender, it provides you a much more diversity in who you get to work with, who gets to service you. So that kind of thing I hope is here to stay. On the education side, it is also giving parents much more flexibility on who they're choosing to educate their child. And I think as you look at from a cultural standpoint, knowing oftentimes that Black and brown students get the short end of the stick in our educational institutions, oftentimes this now gives parents flexibility on who's educating my child, or even a peek inside the classroom from day to day where they normally did not have that access. So I think there's some silver linings in that, right? On the job side and our Miami economy, I think as you're looking at technology opportunities, you saw a lot of companies, major technology companies, even small startups saying, hey, we're going virtual or remote permanently. And so if you're living in another city that has a really high cost of living, you may now start looking at Miami as a place to relocate and still be able to be connected to the company that you're working for remotely. And so I'd say being able to increase how we do that outreach and how we market. I know we talked about Talbot, right? That's his jam, right? Kind of promoting Miami as a place to live and work. But as you're relating to high wage technology jobs, now being able to locate and what that actually does for the economy if we're attracting more people because they're remote also presents an opportunity. I think as we're looking on the social justice side of what that means for our businesses, we have a lot of work to do, right? I think what happened in, the earlier part of the pandemic around George Floyd was, we saw a lot of noise, right? Not just noise, but we saw a lot of kind of, we are making this stand, Black Lives Matter. And I think now, right, we're just looking to hold more companies accountable. Like, what is the long-term plan for equity within your companies, equity within your boards, equity within your funding, either from the social corporate responsibility side, or even the companies that you decide to work with from an innovation standpoint and setting up innovation labs within your companies, right? And so we have a lot of work to do around that. I think this moment of holding companies accountable, especially here in South Florida, where we are a very diverse city, but we're diverse by default and not always by intention. And so moving forward, I think all of us holding each other accountable in the business community, saying, what else are we doing? Do we have a collective plan? And are we going to hold these companies accountable for their hiring practices, for their vendorization practices as well moving forward, is something that we all have to work on. And I hope that thinking of action and not just allyship is something that also stays into the future.
Thank you for that. Lenore, Felecia just mentioned the role of, digital and education. And I think a lot of parents, quite frankly, are probably concerned about the education of their children moving forward, right? To this new way as we adapt pretty rapidly. So looking out, what are your biggest concerns right now for our students and higher education? And what is it, how can the business community or government help in that respect?
Thank you, Mindy, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for the invitation from the Beacon Council. I think looking at the current situation that we're in and looking at where we are today and the urgency for the upcoming fall semester, and then also thinking long-term, there's a couple of things that we need to keep in mind. As Felecia mentioned, education always plays such a key role in helping to provide economic and social mobility for those who live in our community. And we have an opportunity right now, even in the midst of this pandemic and this crisis, to help individuals to access that education. So right now there's a concern about taking classes, about coming back onto the campuses. But the reality is that we at Miami-Dade College and all of the higher education institutions across our region have right now the ability to be able to provide remote education, blended education for those who do want some sort of face-to-face interaction with the faculty. And assuming that the pandemic conditions continue to improve, there's a possibility that we might be able to start returning some folks to campus even during this upcoming fall semester. So the availability for education is there. And now that there are so many employees who are currently out of a job or furloughed, this is a great time for businesses to join forces with organizations like Miami-Dade College, like other higher education institutions, and get those employees who are currently out of work or missing out on paychecks to take advantage and continue their education and perhaps upskill and retrain. So we have a lot of lower level employees who might need help with brushing up with their language skills. There are other employees who might be ready to retrain in digital technology, in different business areas, accounting technology, and so on. We have rapid credentialing programs to help those individuals retool and retrain. We've always been an affordable option for higher education in our community, but thanks to donors in our community, in particular the Mitchell-Wolfson Senior Foundation, all of the donors that help to contribute through our MDC Foundation, we have some really attractive scholarship packages that not only cover tuition and fees, but also provide stipends for individuals who might need to make ends meet so that they can enroll full-time and finish these credentials in as little as 2 semesters. So trying to get these folks back into the classroom, retool, retrain, and be ready for those jobs that are going to be available as we start to recover, because we will recover, is critically important. And so while it's a difficult situation for everyone, that silver lining is there, that now they have this opportunity, they have the time to re-engage with the educational system and take that next step to further their own career and well-being for themselves and their families.
I think you raise a really, I think one of the key things that we're going to have to grapple with in this community is that, the vast majority of Miami-Dade businesses have under 50 employees, right? And many have fewer than 10. Small businesses are really being devastated right now. What can we do to either, provide new opportunities? And I'm going to open up, it could be, George, José, I don't know, anyone who wants to jump in, Felecia, but really what can the government, private sector do to support? Because that's a lot of individuals who are, losing their ability to earn a living. Who wants to jump in?
Well, I'll jump in, and just that the degree to which we can get this thing more under control in our community, the quicker we can open up, and people will have confidence to go out and spend money, and the community leaders will have more confidence in the ability to open back up even more, allow more restaurants to go later and that kind of thing. So just, I think the business community has really got to emphasize masking and social distancing, and everybody being responsible in order to get these numbers, way down. Let's get to where New Zealand is.
George, I wondered if you had some additional thoughts, since you have the economic ability to maybe help. You talked about some of the efforts you already have going. Oh, you're on mute. Sorry. You're on mute. George is on mute.
Hey,
there you go.
Better? There you go. Thank you. So first of all, I do agree with both. We obviously have a health crisis that's having a financial impact in all of our businesses. I think the Paycheck Protection Program was a Treasury and SBA program for 8 to 24 weeks. And I do believe we need a second or third tranche right now. And for those companies with 50 or 10 employees, and Bank of America's administrative facilitator, and we will make sure that we are advising those small companies with 10 employees or 50 employees to go through the process. And it's definitely needed. And we will make sure, we are open for business. We are taking care of our clients right now. And we're making sure that they go through the health crisis. But as Bo mentioned, we need to take care of this health crisis first. Because if not, we're not going to come out of this pandemic. We're not going to come out of this financial impact. We're in the middle of a recession. We are, bending the curve. But how long it's going to be? And that's a variable that we all need to work on. And that while we work on that variable, we do need the federal government to step in and put additional funds out there to keep these employees employed. And we will do our part to make sure we deploy that capital into the market, into the communities that we work in.
Yeah, Mindy, if I could, just one comment here. I think I think one thing that we as business leaders in a community like Miami-Dade County, with the help of the council and all the professionals that are here, I think part of the reality that we need to look at when you have a situation like this, an economic crisis, in this case brought on by a global public health pandemic, but it's happened before for other reasons. You've run into a pretty significant recessionary environment. I think it's important as we look forward and try to help these small businesses, entrepreneurs, employees come out of this situation. Many of the small businesses in particular, it's happened in our space as well. They were already in a really bad situation heading into the crisis. The crisis didn't cause their problems. It simply exposed their reality, right? And I'm not a proponent. I don't think we do any justice to the economy and to these folks supporting non-viable businesses. They have upside down capital structures. They weren't really addressing the needs of the consumers. So they were in a bad place before the crisis, and the crisis simply just exposed them for the reality. And so I think it's really important as we advise businesses, entrepreneurs, you have small mom and pops, and in some cases we have small franchisees that they were struggling in advance of the crisis, and we've had to help them find a path forward, not by propping them up in a manner that's not going to solve the problem, but addressing the real issues in their business so that they can then come out. And this could mean retooling their organization from a capital structure. It could mean retooling it from a people standpoint, trimming down the size of their business and focusing them on something that they can manage to be more viable. So I think it's much more complex than simply throwing capital behind it. And I think it's really important for us as business leaders, if we want to make an impact on Miami-Dade County, to have the kind of the grit and the strength of character to be able to also look at those businesses that probably need to close down and allow for others to come in and create more jobs in the economy.
Yeah, I think when we talk about small businesses here, there's a wide range in Miami, right? You have high growth companies, you also have small mom and pop companies, you also have e-commerce companies, you even have trap kitchens, right? Like we run the gamut here in South Florida. I think what's a really important conversation to have is we also need to approach this more holistically than transactional. And I hear a lot of that conversation. We're dealing with real human beings that are not only facing real business challenges of just day-to-day running a business, but also doing that under a pandemic. And then also still trying to be a good steward of the employees and trying to keep these people employed to take care of their families. And so it's a very nuanced conversation that we have to have. Where I'm talking about holistically, Jaret raised a really important point that I don't see a lot of programs structured around helping small businesses access the financial opportunities that are available to them is consultants, right? We're oftentimes in programs, we're asking people to accelerate their learning in this whole other area that's completely different from them running their business in order to be able to apply for opportunities. And if we can structure programs that put more people into businesses to help them clean up the back end, get their back end together so that they are at a right point from a capacity standpoint to then apply for opportunities, we will see more businesses being able to survive, right? I think there's a lot of information that has been thrown around about Black businesses, right? 40% of Black businesses, according to some articles, are not going to survive COVID. They've already closed. A lot of them could still stay open. So we think about accounting consultants. If we can fund programs like that, that literally bring an accountant into your business, as opposed to telling an entrepreneur, hey, come learn this new thing that is not the wheelhouse of what you run, how you're running your business in order to stay afloat. I think we can be more innovative in our approaches and not big stuff, but also being innovative in the very simple things that can provide solutions that are literally can be life-saving solutions for businesses in our community. But we have to be thinking more holistically. And I think that's the nature of Miami at its core of our people is right. That we have to be thinking about solutions in that same way.
Is there anything, anyone, and is there anything right now happening that approximates anything that's what Felecia and José were saying? Essentially a very similar thing. It's just like, how do you get beyond like the small business loan or to be able to really help sustain a sector of our economy that's really 85% small business. We don't have the big corporates.
Mindy?
Yes.
It's Mike Finney. I should probably jump in on this one, although I'm really enjoying the feedback from the panelists. You all are doing amazing, but we actually have launched an effort in part from a task force that was developed by Miami-Dade County Commission. It's the Economic Recovery Task Force, and with Mayor Jimenez, what we're calling some implementation partners. So we have actually got 28 different organizations that are all part of the small business ecosystem that's now working with us in an effort to provide technical assistance to all these small businesses that are struggling to get access to capital and other resources that they need. So what José described, what Felecia described, and Jaret is probably the most significant issue that we identified during this whole crisis that's preventing these companies from getting back on their feet. Imagine this, the PPP program, first round, $350 million, second round, $250 billion. And so during those two rounds, the second round, roughly $120 billion was left on the table. So how could it be that we have all these small businesses that desperately need access to capital and could not get it from this federal program, and it literally was left on the table? It's because they didn't have that back-end support. They didn't have that technical assistance they needed that Felecia was describing. Their accounting system wasn't right. They didn't have tax records. They didn't have payroll records. They didn't have cash flow statements or whatever was required in order to go after these loans. These small businesses weren't prepared for it. And so we need to be able to provide much more robust technical assistance. And under normal conditions, they do just fine. But when it comes time where we have a disaster, whether it's a hurricane or something else, and now you have these programs that require proper business documentation to access, we then find that we have a lot of our small and disadvantaged businesses that are not ready. I mean, we literally are working with, in round numbers, about 450 companies right now that we're trying to help gain access to some other funding programs that are available. And it's a challenge. And it's clearly one of the resources that we need to have much more strength in this community in order for us to address the problems that the three panelists were describing.
Thank you for that. Related question is, we talk about small businesses, but another key area, quite frankly, is that, one of the most immediate issues, and I think it's going to have long-term impact, is the low-skill, low-wage jobs that are related to the hospitality industry, et cetera. Some predictions say that we're not going to see really, and I know Bill Talbot doesn't want to hear this, but anyway, that hospitality won't, tourism won't fully return, right, till 2024. So how, what are our long-term plans as a community to get those folks employed? How do we get them to earn a living? And I would open it to, I know, Felecia, Jaret, anyone who wants to, Bo, anybody who wants to jump in, but, how are we thinking about how we address a very important part of our economic ecosystem, but one that's going to be really deeply impacted?
I'll jump in. I mean, it's funny. We always talk about this problem. We say, well, we can't put everyone through a coding program, which is absolutely true. But what we can do is put them through the mentality of a coding program, which is the notion that within 12 weeks or 8 weeks, you can be completely retooled for a new career is absolutely critical. We were having this discussion well before COVID-19, that the traditional education model, and if you talk to all of our different institutes of higher learning, FIU, Miami-Dade College, et cetera, they're all at the vanguard of this, realizing that the 4-year degree isn't sufficient because we're all going to have to retool, and reinvent ourselves every 5, 10, 15 years. It just happened to be that COVID accelerated. And the population you're talking about, the low-wage workers, it's absolutely critical. And so we've been talking for a while that you have to have this ability to do, what some people call education agility, which is to be able to turn and retool as quickly as possible. It's funny, in the case of these workers, normally I would say healthcare would be a great segue for them. As you know, I chair Nicholas Children's Hospital, so I deal with this issue a lot. And there are some similarities. I mean, a hospital is essentially a hotel in some ways. Look, one of the major metrics we talk about is how many beds we have. The problem is right now, and Bo nailed it, is that because we're not as compliant in this county as we could be, elective procedures have had to be minimized, if not eliminated at times. That reduces the kind of volumes that health systems have. That reduces the income we have to be able to hire people from the hospitality industry. So it all links in together. But what I would say is the goal is to have a retooling system that can do it very quickly. We've got the coding programs as a guide. It is possible to retool someone in just 12 weeks. And then push it from there. The work that Rick Beasley's doing with, South Florida Workforce is amazing in that regard. But we need more programs like that can retool folks and then redeploy them out there.
Lenore, you had some more, there's something you're already working on to this regard, right?
That's right. So just last week, the County Commission approved a program that is being funded through federal CARES dollars, specifically aimed at hotel workers. And so we've partnered with the county to help provide both this economic relief in the form of stipends that are going to these unemployed and furloughed hotel workers. But in order to receive the stipend, the individuals need to participate in a 2-day training with us. And we'll be offering this training in Spanish, in English, and in Creole. It's a 2-day training. The first day is focused on helping them get additional skills should they continue in the hospitality sector once we begin the recovery. But then the second day is really focused on what are additional opportunities for them to upskill and to retrain, both through non-credit and credit options at Miami-Dade College. So this package of both training as well as an immediate economic relief is going to be really important to these workers who find themselves in this situation right now with the pandemic. So we literally just finalized the agreement last week with the county. We're hoping to launch the program towards the end of August and are working closely with the hotels to identify those individuals who have been either let go or furloughed so that we can prioritize them to participate in the program.
Thank you for that.
Just real quick, Jaret hit the nail on the head. We'll hire some of them. We actually have a shortage of environmental service workers for some of our hospitals. and clinical partners, which are people who haven't yet gotten their nursing degrees. There's going to be continued growth in the healthcare sector. We call it the silver tsunami because we're all aging. You know what the number one causal factor is for cancer, and that is aging. So heart disease, neurological disease, orthopedic injury, orthopedic issues, cancer, they're all going to grow as our population ages, and we're going to need more and more people in the healthcare sector. So we just need to train and retool some of these folks, and we can keep them here locally, keep them employed, and give them benefits too.
Right. Yeah, but Mindy, coming back on this question, I think there's definitely a short-term issue here of addressing either small business owners that are going to be displaced and have to find new jobs in different sectors, or other situations that are difficult as that might be. We need to tackle that short term, but I think this is a question that keeps coming up in South Florida time and time again, right? The question of diversifying the economy, right. Creating an environment in South Florida where it's not just tourism and hospitality that drives the economy, but there's a growing financial services sector, a growing maybe industrial sector as well. I think technology, we need to attract big companies or exciting new companies in the tech field so that we can attract tech talent. We've been building up our engineering capabilities at RBI for the brands, and it's been a really difficult journey for us in South Florida to find local talent that's capable of coding and developing software. And it's even more difficult to bring them in because folks that are in the tech space, they don't want to come to South Florida. They want to be in places where there's other tech-friendly companies. So I think we have a big infrastructure and kind of structural challenge in front of us, which will come up again and again, whether it's caused by a global pandemic or another recession. It's cyclical. It's going to happen. It's going to happen again. It always does. We need to move in that direction as businesses across this great county to be able to have an impact long-term and have a diversified economy that can survive and thrive in any situation.
And that's a question that someone asked in the Q&A, which is like, how do we actually move away from, right? Is this an opportunity, in moments of chaos and great disruption, there's opportunity. So is this a moment for us how do we move from, we've been saying it for decades, as long as I can remember, let's move to, away from tourism. But, George, Felecia, Lenore, I mean, how do we move? How do we do that? I mean, what's the opportunity now when we're sitting here a year from now to really reset?
Well, and I think a part of that has a great deal to do with education. And, through our One Community, One Goal, we've identified the target industries that are projected for growth, not just hospitality, but in other areas. And so as we continue to think about ways of diversifying the economy, looking to those key areas that are already projected to growth is sort of the low-hanging fruit, and ensuring that we've got the programs to help individuals rapidly retool into those areas is going to be key. And that's, I think, what, from an educational perspective, we need input from the business community to identify what exactly are those most needed skills, both short term, so post-pandemic, what are the skills that you're going to be looking for in the folks that you're going to be rehiring into your various organizations? And then longer term, as we continue to project the growth, then what are the longer term, higher level skills that we're going to need these folks to have? And so having those conversations, continuing them, but really putting more intentionality behind them is going to be key, I think, for our recovery.
In a related vein, and this is for any of you who want to jump in here, is do any of you expect a talent shortfall in a particular industry given this moment in time and what we're experiencing with education and other disruption? George, I don't know, or Jaret, does anybody see?
I mean, what I would say to that is, I've actually been keeping in close touch with particularly FIU and UM, and the deans, the president, et cetera, they're all over it. They have online capabilities that are going up. You know, the biggest concern of higher ed seems to be, to the extent they offer the infrastructure, will students defer? Things like that. You know, I just saw an article that in Harvard, their incoming class deferred, 20% of them deferred. But that's an economic issue. But in terms of having raw bodies being put through the usual pipeline, we haven't seen anything that would lead us to believe that that's going to be a problem. And we monitor our sources of talent very closely because that's our future. And I haven't seen anything that puts that on my radar. But I'll say that both from a healthcare point of view, wearing my Nicholas hat, as well as a law and undergrad and what have you view, wearing my Greenberg Traurig hat.
I think it's something that we definitely need to watch closely. CNET had a study that they recently put out about just kind of the sheer number of job listings in the tech space. Like San Francisco is down 38% as far as like their listing for employment compared to last year. North Carolina, some of the other major tech hubs, well, I don't throw North Carolina in there, but on the fintech side, but some of the other major tech hubs are also seeing a decline in like their job listings. I think what we really want to start doing is also looking at not just the sheer number of job listings, but companies that are currently under hiring freezes that are also not being transparent, right? And so like there is this kind of skewed number that we definitely need to dissect. I think on again, kind of leaning on just looking at ways that we can solve these problems in the short end and then plan for the long term is something that we definitely need to be thinking through. I think one conversation that we don't really have are like, what are high growth, either job opportunities as it relates to people's lived experiences and their cultures? And then what are the high growth opportunities for business growth as well? That's something that's very rarely talked about in the Black community. I ask people like, what are the 3 high growth areas for Black entrepreneurship in South Florida? And most people can't answer those questions. That's something that we're working on with Center for Black Innovation to be able to supply companies and organizations with that data, but then also looking for those high growth opportunities that require low skill, that still allow you an opportunity to work in high tech spaces is something that we should be solving for and working on the short end. And I know a lot of our educational institutions are starting working on that, but I think we really need to accelerate that if we're talking about defining what this new normal is going to be. And I think that also presents a really unique opportunity for us in South Florida. As every city is trying to decide what the new normal is going to be, we need to figure out what our new normal messaging is going to be in order to start attracting a lot of the resources that we've been talking about on this call.
Well, I wanted to ask you a question specific to the healthcare industry, and that is, you know, you mentioned telemedicine, and if we talk about that maybe as a silver lining of the pandemic, but when you're looking beyond COVID, you know, from doctor's visits to elective surgery, you know, surgery procedures, what's the strategy for the future on that front?
Well, the strategy is to be creative and think about all of the possible permutations of telemedicine. And I think that we're just scratching the surface of it. And it certainly appeals to consumers because you can have access to healthcare any place, anytime. So I guess number one is we've got to all be open to that. I realize that there might be some generational obstacles to that, but you know, largely it is very, very directionally correct. And then most of us healthcare providers have fully embraced the necessity to make consumers, patients, visitors feel comfortable in the environment. So as long as people are comfortable in the environment, hopefully they are going to return. There was just an article came out 2 days ago that cancer diagnosis is down 40% nationwide over prior year. And, you know, that's because people are not getting the elective surgery that normally says, hey, you might have cancer, and they're delaying and deferring visits. And so what we've got to do is we've got to create a situation where people feel comfortable in coming back and re-engaging in taking care of their own health and seeing their doctors. It's either barriers in the office, blocking off chairs, you know, all of the things you do in facilities to inspire confidence, but then also telemedicine.
Great. George, shifting a little bit to something you touched on in your top of the panel discussion is
Yes.
what are the things that you would say the business community is doing right now from an equity inclusion perspective, and what is something that where we need to improve? And obviously, I would open that up to others as well. But if you might.
Absolutely, and I think that's a great question because I think what we obviously are missing the talent, and I think everybody has hit it right on spot on as to education. And we need to make sure that we are educating the workforce, shifting, of course, different career path. And the most important one, after they shift and they have pivoted to a different career, healthcare, from hospitality and so forth, it's the affordable housing. And I think we all seem to fail to mention affordable housing right now. And of course, we've been trying to attract talent. I deal with a lot of companies, mid-size to small size, that are having a real hard time and finding that talent. And Jared, to your point, yeah, FIU, have great programs. And unfortunately, we have other companies from other states recruiting and pretty much poaching in our backyard and taking the talent away. I think Jose was right on point as to businesses that were already failing pre-COVID. COVID just put them over the edge. Mike Finney was talking about, $150 billion left on the table on the PPP program. And that's because you have great companies, great businesses, small and pops and small businesses that did not have the documentation. They knew how to run their businesses, but they just did not have the documentation. So we have a lot of opportunity for all of us, civic leaders, as well as the Miami-Dade Beacon Council, and I love what Mike said, educating our communities to making sure they are ready to accept whatever comes their way and get the access to the funds or shift to whatever education. So, there's a lot of opportunity. If you ask me, there's a lot of opportunity. What we're doing right, we're identifying it. We are definitely identifying, and we just need to take that next step in making sure that we educate them correctly.
Here's a question for all of you, and just jump in, if whoever wants to kind of take this. But I've been here for a long time. I grew up here, and many of you have very deep roots here as well. The promises of the resolution from the Black boycott in the 80s have largely gone unfulfilled, and now we're witnessing another important social justice movement. But increasing numbers of Black professionals continue to move out of town. How can Miami reverse that brain drain and overall, to George's point, the just young professionals who can't afford to live here anymore because of the high cost of living and particularly housing?
Well, the answer to the first question would be hire them. If you have a lot of Black talent leaving, that's going to be because they either A, are not getting the jobs that they feel that their skill set merits, or B, we have a retention.
The job's not here, Jared? does it just not exist here, or is it something else? I
think the jobs are here. You can go back and forth on that, but actually I think retention is in some ways a bigger issue than recruitment. What you see anecdotally out there is, in terms of initial pipeline, there's probably some success there, but then it's the retention issue. A lot of folks feel disillusioned. There's a variety of problems that kick in, and then they leave and they say, you know what, I'm going to relocate to Atlanta, DC, New York, where there's more of a critical mass of Black professionals and a more critical mass of non-Black professionals and employers who might view them within a different lens. You get into issues of implicit bias a lot, et cetera. We talk about this all the time, that when it comes to promotion, when it comes to various, what we call HR decisions, if you will, there is a lens issue that kicks in. And that's not meant to be accusatory or anything of that sort. It's more, I always tell people, it's not that you're bad, it's that you're sick. We're all sick. I have implicit bias issues myself. And I think one of the many positive consequences of this dialogue is, I think for the first time, at least in my lifetime, I'm seeing a lot of people more open and more receptive to that input than ever before. It used to be there was always a wall up that people say, no, that's not me. I don't see color. Fortunately, it's rare you see someone making that argument anymore. I think we've all accepted we do see color, we do see gender, we do see nationalities. That's not a bad thing. You know, we always say the goal is to evolve from mere tolerance to actually celebration of differences. And I think the issue is we were stuck in tolerance mode where we said, okay, Jared's a black guy, I'll accept him. Gee, thanks. I mean, that's not exactly a ringing endorsement. The odds of me getting a promotion within your organization are minimal with that kind of mindset. But if we say, yeah, Jared's a black guy, tell me about your culture, your background, and by the way, you bring so much value to our organization on multiple levels, that's an entirely different mindset. And that's going to be a mindset in an environment where Black professionals feel, hey, I have a role here. I can actually succeed here. I can thrive. I can grow within the organization. So I think part of this mentality, part of it is much more macro. You know, Felecia nailed it. We keep having this conversation about businesses like it's a monolith, even within small business. There's so many different types of businesses. You've got the high growth small business. You've got what I'll call in reality, large small business. Remember, small business can be $100 million in revenue. And then you have what is the case in many of Miami businesses, tiny small business, which is they have employ 5 people, et cetera. And the strategies you have to go through for each one of those is very complex. I have seen, you were asking George, you know, what have we seen positive in the community? On a global basis, I have 2 clients right now, which are, you know, African-American venture funds that are receiving a significant amount of investment from, you know, large organizations, large foundations who have said, in light of what's going on, we want to infuse you with capitals and we want you to commit to a mandate that you'll go out there and seed Black businesses. That's a very positive development. Now, how it looks, how it develops, you know, it's a sort of greenfield. A lot of this has never been done before, unfortunately. But that's a positive development. I'm not saying just money will accomplish it. It has to be smart money, it has to be strategic. But to do that kind of investment and to change the narrative that it's not really investing in the problem, it's investing in an opportunity, it's investing in an asset. Diversity is an asset. And we've said that for decades, but I don't think we've ever believed it. And so I think now the narrative is starting to switch to, no, we really do see diversity as an asset. And just as I would decide to invest in a piece of equipment or to invest in a piece of land, I'm going to invest in having a diverse workforce. Yeah. So the long-winded answer to your question, how do you reverse the brain drain, is hire them and make them feel like they're valued. And it also goes for the businesses. You're employing Black talent, but you're also engaging Black business in terms of going to Black small businesses. One of the issues that's rarely talked about, and it's an issue for my firm. Most large companies, we use national contracts. You know, when Greenberg Traurig puts on an RFP, even for diversity purposes, there's a few small firms that we trust. We put an RFP out to them and we do a national contract. It covers all of our offices. Well, think about that for Miami-Dade County. Right. A lot of businesses that you could get a live business from tend to have their headquarters elsewhere. In our case, we're headquartered in Miami. It's a little easier. But a lot of businesses tend to be headquartered elsewhere, so their procurement function might be elsewhere. It might be in Atlanta, DC, et cetera. And they might be sending these RFPs to these national diversity firms, which are great, but then that leaves off all the small diversity firms within South Florida. And so that's an issue we need to solve for.
I was going to jump off of what Jared just said, both to you, as you represent one of the largest employers in the county with, I think, obviously healthcare with the potential to grow. How do you see the role of businesses in hiring and diversifying the workforce? Are there programs that you already have in place or conversations that are happening around that?
Certainly there's conversations around it, and there need to be lots of conversations around it. We're really proud of our track record. We're Fortune 100 best places to work over 20 years in a row. And within the Fortune database, they tell us that we are listed as one of the most diverse companies. That's simply a product of Miami being extremely diverse. We've got a diversity council that we have chartered. We've got really great, enlightened HR folks, and we're doing our absolute best to participate in the conversations and participate in, giving people a hand up and including people in opportunities. I mean, one of the great things about healthcare is in Miami is how truly diverse it is. You walk the halls in our hospitals, it's an incredibly diverse group of people. But we're not resting on our laurels. We know we've got a lot of responsibility in this area, and we're going to do our best.
Thank you. Lenore, what role do you see education playing in that, right? In trying to make sure that we can, train and retain and Black professionals?
So I think education obviously plays a huge role when we look at economic mobility and the acquisition of degrees. The Black population by far is underperforming compared to all other populations that we see at our institutions. Even at Miami-Dade College, where we've been known for our success and completion rates, the Black students are performing at about 10 percentage points above what the national average is for all students in terms of actually completing degrees. But there's a gap between their performance and the performance of other students within our own institution. And so every year we look at this data and try to identify ways in which we can better engage with our Black students and understand what their very specific needs are. And so education, we know, is key. Having that credential is going to have long-term economic impact for all of the individuals who obtain them. But the challenge is getting to that finish line. When we ask our students why they drop out, a lot of times it has absolutely nothing to do with academics or being able to keep up with the coursework. It has to do with life getting in the way. And so we hear things like, I have to work in order to help and make ends meet. We don't have transportation, there's a housing issue. And so it becomes this vicious circle where the life circumstances keep them from being able to obtain those degrees, which then don't allow them to get the jobs that solve the life issues. And so I think as a community, we need to look at education as the primary goal in order to help individuals achieve that equity when we talk about economic mobility. But as a community, we have to come together and put those puzzle pieces together. How do we help a student who's enrolled in a program stay in school by helping to solve the challenges that they're having with housing and transportation and childcare, and the list goes on and on. And so we can do some of that in-house at our institution and the other institutions across our area, but there's only so much that we can do. We have food pantries, we provide some emergency funding, we have our donors provide us with scholarships and stipends to give to the students, but it's a much bigger problem than what an educational institution can solve. And we need community partners to help pitch in and help us to keep our students in school. And so we're launching a set of initiatives beginning this year where we're doing surveys and focus groups, both of students who are enrolled and students who chose not to enroll at the institution, to understand what are the very specific needs of our Black students, and in particular Black males, and how do we help keep them in school so that they can obtain that degree and start to make that shift for themselves and for their families and our community.
Thank you.
I think
Felecia, yeah, I was going to follow to you.
Yeah, well, I think when you talk about retention of either talent within a city or within a company, two things are really important parts of this conversation. One is kind of the culture internally, and then the other part is trust. A way to move forward is like, we have to hack for trust in Miami. We tell young people that there's a certain way for them to get job opportunities, but then the reality is it's relationship. And if I am looking for a job, I'm not going on Craigslist or LinkedIn. I'm reaching out to my network. And my network has to trust the Black and brown people that I recommend them enough in order to then internally fight for them and vouch for them to get an opportunity within their companies. We don't have that transparent conversation enough. And that's very problematic for our young people. It's very problematic for that's how we do business. And so that's the first part, is hacking.
Like a small town, big city.
And then the internal culture, right? And so once you get someone of color into your organization, and we understand the value add of culture and all of that, are you doing the work internally to then keep them there? That, hey, this is a safe space. This is a space that I am valued, and this is a space that I can grow. And so you can increase the lifetime value of that employee that you're bringing in by also looking internally to making sure that everything is there that shows them that they're valued. And then the other part of that is then their ladder up. are you also creating clear pathways that are also relational, right? Of like having certain relationships, and that's how I move faster than the other person. Like there's very honest, transparent conversations that we have to have about how we really do business. And then the story that is told to our young people, especially our young people that are graduating from our colleges and say, hey, I'm doing everything that I'm told to do, but that in actuality is not the way that I find and unlock opportunities and have a pathway moving forward so that there's an actual economic shift in our communities.
Yeah, and I think that just relates to it. Bo, who's going to jump in?
George, I'm sorry. I couldn't agree more, Felecia. Felecia, you hit it right on the head as to trust and the culture and identifying that talent. So I belong to what's the National Council Employee Network that we call Diversity and Inclusion nationally, where we identified the talent, not only to identify, develop, and retain, but it comes with those conversations, it comes with that trust, and it comes with the culture. And to Jared's point, we also have an initiative since I've been in Bank of America for the past 6 years, where we are going for Black-owned businesses. We are owned businesses as well as Hispanic Latino businesses. Not only in Miami, where we are 78% Hispanic Latino, 55% foreign born, but across the country. So our initiative is it's literally outreach to own, doesn't matter, what color, gender, sexuality, it doesn't matter. So Felecia, what you're saying is just music to my ears because it's truly it's grassroots, come from the top. And when I say grassroots, upside down because it goes from the top down and down up. To truly identify those great talents in order to retain them and develop them and coach them through the next move to make sure they have a career here. And that's when we go out to the colleges to recruit for internships, show them what Bank of America is about, show them our culture, show them our environment in order to make sure that we want to retain them and they want to stay here.
Great.
Mindy, also one quick thing. There's also a language issue that has to be addressed in our educational programs as well. A lot of Black, either they're coming out of boot camps or coming out of universities. The real reality is that you have to have dual language here in South Florida. And that's also another reason that they leave. So I think as we look at our programs, whether that's Career Source, whether that's even our organization CodeFever, you have to add Spanish language training to the programs that are outputting talent so that they can actually be competitive in Miami and be able to unlock opportunities.
Are you doing that really? Is that, yeah?
That's something that we're adding for the fall. But it's also the thing that I keep screaming to other organizations, like if you're outputting Black developers, junior developers, just even talent across the board, and you're not also thinking about, in order for them to be competitive, they have to learn a second language, because immediately if you're looking at job descriptions across the board in South Florida, 9 times out of 10, that is also a requirement, and that becomes something that makes them ineligible for that opportunity. And so again, not an overly sophisticated, innovative approach, but it's something that is necessary in order to unlock other opportunities, so we don't continue to have a major brain drain as it relates to Black communities not being able. It's a reality in South Florida that is not necessarily reality in other places.
Well, if you want the ultimate proof point of that, even within South Florida, compare the Black professional numbers in Broward and Palm Beach with Miami. Broward and Palm Beach is not as much of an issue, and therefore you do have a larger Black community, a Black professional community in those counties than you do Miami-Dade County.
And many of them formerly lived in Miami-Dade, right?
That's right.
Up north. Jose, I think we have a couple more minutes. You wanted to chime in? No?
I think everyone's covered off on the topics. I think ultimately the responsibility for diversity and inclusion, I think the bigger issue here with retention is a topic of inclusion within the companies that they're involved in. I think that responsibility is a responsibility of the leaders in those businesses. We've taken really big strides over the last couple of years on this important issue. We've highlighted as one of our core values, creating a diverse and inclusive culture in our company, and have given all of our leadership team in the company one of their KPIs for the year is ensuring that we have a very diverse 50% or more of candidates that we interview for external positions, professional hires, including folks coming in from undergrads and MBA programs, have to be demonstrably diverse. Our challenge is one of recruitment, not necessarily of inclusion. So we're tackling that head on, and I think I would welcome other leaders in the community to take that responsibility, as Bo mentioned and George mentioned and Jaret and others mentioned as well. I think we can make some real good progress in Miami-Dade County if we do this as leaders in the business community. Okay.
Well, I think we are exactly at time, which is not a Miami quality that normally we share, to be timely, speaking for myself. So we could talk for a lot more time, but I really appreciate, thank you, Felecia, Lenore, José, Bo, George, and Jaret for joining us today. There's a lot of chat going on, so a lot of interaction, all wonderful feedback on, and thank you for your leadership, really, because it's clear that if every business in this community was leading the way that you are each leading yours, then we'd be in perhaps an even better place. So thank you to all of you for spending time with us this afternoon.
Thank you for organizing this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mindy.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate it. Have a great day.
Great job, folks. To the panelists, tremendous job. Thank you so much for taking the time. This was very insightful.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.